Welcome to another CHRO Conversation hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Ken Carrig, who is currently the Director of the Center for Executive Succession. Prior to joining CES, Ken served as the CHRO of SunTrust Banks, Cisco Corporation, Comcast, and Continental Airlines. Today we are speaking with Ken about his strategy book, which he co-authored with Professor Scott Snell, called Strategic Execution: Driving Breakthrough Performance in Business. Ken, thank you very much for joining us. We sincerely appreciate having you as a director of our Center for Executive Succession, and your career has been tremendous, so the knowledge that you're able to share with us and our students here is really special, so thank you.
Thank you. Really enjoying it.
So today we want to talk really specifically about the book that you recently wrote with Scott Snell. And it's extraordinary in that it combines your tremendous history and the knowledge you've accumulated with Scott, who's a renowned academic in the HR field. Can you say a little bit, just kind of overview of the book and kind of what your idea was for how you got that started?
Sure. If I can take a paid public announcement and title the book, Strategic Execution and Driving for Breakthrough Performance. And really, Scott, being the consummate academic that he is, was working with us at SunTrust when I was a CHRO there, developing our strategy for execution. And he saw what we were doing, believed there was a framework from it, and was able to convince me to join him in doing roundtables across the country. And when we started doing the roundtables with other CHROs and other executives, we learned that execution was just as important in all different industry companies and all different sizes of companies as it was with us in the financial services and at SunTrust. And so with that interest and with some of the work that we did at SunTrust as an initial framework, we pushed along and were able to create something that we felt was universal for other leaders to potentially follow.
So can you say a little bit more about that? Because the initial premise of the book is that execution is really one of the key, if not the key, responsibilities of a CEO. And yet that's not often what we think about when we think about what should a CEO be doing, because we think about them as a strategy person. So
yeah.
Can you say a little bit about where that came from?
That was surprising to a certain extent, because the pace of change is so fast with globalization and digitalization that where you do have strategic competitive advantages, they're just temporary for most companies. And so when Scott and I met with CEOs and executives, they just reinforced that point. And then they shared how complex it is to get execution right across an entire organization. And so you take the combination of your strategic advantages are temporary. Execution is very difficult. There's no real, there's not as many strategies for formulating business execution as there are for creating strategy. And so we just found a great interest in that. And CEOs find that as one of their most important things that they're doing. And when I was at SunTrust, one of my first experiences, we were at a strategic offsite meant to create our strategy. We looked at the other 10 banks and where they were outperforming us and why they were outperforming us. And during the middle of it, the executive team, we had an epiphany that it wasn't whether you were strategic imperatives was around consumer banking or corporate investment banking. It was really how well you were executing that strategy. And so that theme, our CEO and our executive team gained the insight as much as the other CEOs that we were talking with.
So execution really becomes a form of competitive advantage?
I think that's a good way of putting it.
So since you said that CEOs are recognizing this, and your own team started to recognize this, and that's been going on for a while, why is it that we still don't hear that very much? That we still hear it's the driving strategy, and when we're selecting a new CEO, we're thinking, what is their strategic vision going forward, instead of can you execute, and can you get people executing?
Part of the cynic in me thinks that's, we tend to do as we say and not as we do. But I also think if I look at my 20 years as CHRO and on executive teams, most of the CEOs and executives, or at least many of them, came from strategic roles or consulting companies, where they learned and became really good and became really comfortable at creating strategy, then driving execution. And they would leave that to others, right, to drive the execution. And they found out, well, that doesn't work as well either. And so I think there's that part. And then there's the other element that driving execution is just really difficult. And so I think you have leaders that kind of stay in the comfort zone of creating the strategy.
So does this mean that boards should be requiring or asking for execution plans as often as they do strategic plans?
I think you're seeing more boards today get involved with how the strategy is going to be executed, as well as enamored with what is your strategic advantage, how you're going to win in the marketplace.
So in your book, you have a 4A framework. Can you say a little bit about what those 4 A's are?
Well, we try to keep it simple. Scott and I figured if we could remember it, then most people could remember it. So 4 A's. And we start with alignment as our first A. And I want to spend a little time on that because I think that's also what we've learned at SunTrust in my own experience and as we talk to other companies, that's probably the foundational element, is getting the CEO and the executive team and then across the entire organization, from the CEO, from the frontline teammate, to have a shared understanding of the strategic outcomes and then what their commitments are, what their roles are, and their accountability to delivering exceptional performance or meeting the strategic goals is a foundational premise for the framework, and that's alignment. And in the book, we spend a lot of time in that area. All 5 CEOs that we talk with said that was one of the more critical areas. The other 3 A's, just quickly, are ability, architecture, and agility. And so I'll spend a little bit of time on those. So ability is really about people and talent. So it's looking at leadership, how well skilled are your leaders, and how good are your processes at developing leadership. And then there's talent, and so we looked at the organization's talent of the present and are they preparing for the future. And then the third element under ability, kind of 3 dimensions, is collaborative ability. And what we looked there, and we learned that this is really kind of the secret sauce around talent, is how well people work together in the organization, how well they share information and share best practices. So that's the ability leg, if you will, of the four A's. The architecture is really 2-dimensional. We look at hardware, so we look at the structure, the systems, the processes, and then we look at humanware. We look at how decisions are made. We look at how information is shared, and we look at the culture of the organization. So alignment, ability, and architecture. And then the last A is more future-oriented, and it's really about agility, and that is how ready is a company to adapt to the changing nature in the markets and or the landscape? And are they able to reallocate resources effectively? Are they able to create learning systems for people to grow into their new demands that are out there? How well are they able to invest their finances or other capital where the new opportunities are? So that's the agility. And so we look at those 4 A's. We try to keep it so that it's user-friendly and meaningful. As you can see, it's not all-inclusive, but we like to think of it as a Pareto principle on steroids, that with a little, you're going to get a lot.
So it's very interesting, probably not at all coincidental given your career and Scott's also, but all 4 of those really appear to be in the domain of HR. So as a former CHRO, can you say a little bit about how HR is really driving those 4 A's?
Yeah, I think the discipline of execution gives the CHRO and their teams a great opportunity to lead an organization. Now, I think the CHRO needs to be actively engaged in the strategic planning discussions, obviously, and the insights that they bring there. But the implementation of the 4A framework and execution is really a sweet spot, for the CHRO. And as you indicated, when you look at alignment, building shared expectations, building accountability and performance management systems, that's really what the HR team is doing. Ability is all about people. Leadership, talent, collaboration, and how well people are working together. And then even in architecture, where you look at the operating model, how you should structure the organization to ensure that you're enabling sharing of knowledge and not creating barriers. And then agility is the ongoing learning, and are you creating a culture of learning and moving forward? So, yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I will share one of the things that we did that I feel good about at SunTrust. We created an analytic arm to try to bring systematic learning to the executive team of both informal and formal information gathering. So whether I was going out and doing roundtables and just gathering data and leaving it with my analytics group, or if we were taking information from an engagement survey or some other data, we were constantly trying to feed the organization with insights, whether they're real-time or even historical, as to what's happening in the organization, so that the leaders in the CHRO could use that to help drive execution, help kind of link into the 4As.
So this is really interesting to me, because I don't think we have generally given HR the credit for being a key execution arm of a company. Can you just say a little bit more about the agility part of that? Because the first three are really clear. Mm-hmm. And I think what I heard you say is agility also involves creating that culture. So can you say a little bit more about how HR maybe drives culture, if I have that right?
Yes.
Culture is within agility, and whatever else HR might be doing to help really push that agility, because agility is what we hear from everybody is really a key skill for helping individuals and companies going forward.
And it's like many new trends, is to find 100 different ways, right? So when we look at agility, we try to put some kind of structure around it. And it's your ability to reallocate resources well, and HR can be actively engaged in that. We also look at one of the key elements is on this creative learning and ongoing learning and real-time learning. And I'll just give you a quick example. When at SunTrust, we were trying to build our purpose of lighting the way to financial well-being throughout the organization and every teammate. And one of the avenues from an agility standpoint was really leveraging our learning system so that all teammates needed to go through a financial wellness learning in order to be a stakeholder, even working with their clients. And so again, HR can be actively involved in the agility and adaptability of an organization, because I do think it's a big part of the cultural definition.
Right. Ken, the book is sensational and clearly needed, and really touches on unique attributes of both HR and organizations that we haven't seen or thought of very much in the past. So congratulations on the book. And again, thank you very much for being here and being part of Center for Executive Succession. We sincerely are honored and appreciate having you here.
I'm honored to be here, and thanks for your endorsement.
You just listened to another CHRO Conversation. Today, Ken Carrig shared ideas from his book, Strategic Execution: Driving Breakthrough Performance in Business. The book introduces 4 key priorities underlying execution excellence: alignment, agility, ability, and architecture. The 4 A's are key to driving strategic execution and are presented in a manner that makes it easy to see how to apply these to our own businesses. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.